Hello and welcome to this video lecture in your Advanced Legal Communication program. This is the first unit where we focus on persuasive writing. My name is Tennille Duffy, and in this lecture we're going to specifically focus on that skill that we did discuss in the reading material, that of learning how to frame the issue properly. But just take a moment to recall why it is that we focus on persuasive writing. As lawyers, it is very often our job to persuade. And I'm not just talking about those situations where we might be in court or we might be negotiating with a solicitor from the other side or trying to even persuade our client to come around to the advice that we're giving them. Very often we have to persuade in situations where it's not quite so obvious. So think, for example, when you're communicating with one of your colleagues, you might need to persuade them to do some work for you or to help you out with a task. Think about when you are negotiating with someone and it's not an adversarial negotiation, but perhaps you want to persuade them that they could draft that clause for you or to let you do it. These kinds of little details become important as well. When we talk about persuasive writing, we are focusing on those kinds of documents where persuasion is your task. So the kinds of documents you could be thinking of might be plaints, they might be letters of advice, they might be written submissions to the court. There are numerous examples that we covered in the reading material and that I'm sure you can think of even more that you come across in your everyday life. In the reading material, we did focus on the task of framing the issue and how that is an excellent way of starting any of your writing tasks that involve persuasion. It's so important that I want to use this lecture to focus on it specifically and to go through an exercise with you. So at certain points in time, I'll ask you to stop the video and have a go at redrafting or making some notes yourself. So let's do this exercise together and see what we can come up with. Now, I've created a scenario for us, and here's a slide that has some main points on it, but let me just fill you in. The person that we're concerned with is a man called Ram Prakash. He's an Indian man. He was travelling through the region where the Sino-Indian conflict occurred in 1962. He was born in Mumbai in 1942, and he's lived overseas, mainly in the US, since he was 15 years old. He allegedly killed someone, a Chinese citizen. After the killing, Ram returned to the US, where he has been living on and off since that time. The Chinese government was always angry that the killer was never brought to justice. Ram recently returned to India for his grandfather's funeral. He used a fake passport to enter, but he was subsequently discovered. Ram initially disputed his identity in court, but that issue has now been settled, and the authorities are satisfied as to his identity. He never gave up his Indian citizenship, despite not really living here since he was 15. Ram is disputing that he can be tried in India because the territory where the killing allegedly took place was disputed at the time because of the conflict that was occurring. Now, ignore any aspects of history that might not quite fit there. Just pay attention to the fact scenario that I've given you and think about how you would frame the issue that's coming before the court in this particular scenario. Pause the video now, and using the techniques that were discussed in the reading material, try and come up with your own way of framing this issue. Now, you have to do some research on this if you're not already aware of the law in the area, and you would find the principle in Indian criminal law that if someone commits a crime overseas and that someone is an Indian citizen, they can be tried in India as if they committed the crime within the territorial bounds of the country. So with that piece of information, if you need to pause the video again and refine your framing of the issue, go ahead. So what did you come up with? Here is my suggestion on how you could frame the issue in this case. The Indian law provides that when an Indian citizen commits a crime outside of India, he or she may be dealt with in India as if the offence was committed in India. The killing was allegedly committed by Ram, an Indian citizen, in an area of disputed territory during the 1962 Sino-Indian War. Can Ram be tried in an Indian court for murder? Now, let's look at the way that I framed the issue, and you can do the same analysis with your own attempt. Does it fit those requirements that we outlined in the reading material? It does. How many words are in your attempt? Is it less than or around about the suggested 75? And look at the sentences and the way you've constructed that paragraph. In my example, the first clearly outlines the legal principle that you want the court to invoke. The second very clearly outlines the relevant facts for the framing of the issue. Notice how we left out a lot of those other details that I mentioned that are not essential to framing the issue. It doesn't matter when Ram was born, it doesn't matter where he's lived. The important fact that you needed to get out of this scenario was that he is an Indian citizen and he's never given up that citizenship. So it demonstrates how important it is for you to be able to take out the important facts from the entire scenario that you've been given. The third sentence in my example very clearly puts forward the issue that has to be decided in the case. Can Ram be tried in an Indian court for murder? So it's as simple as that. If you practice the skills that we've outlined in detail for you in the reading material, and that we've now covered in this exercise in this lecture, you'll be able to come up with a successful way of framing the issue in almost every case that you have to deal with. And it's not just for cases that are going or disputes that are going before a court. This works whether you're writing a memo or whether you're writing a letter of advice to a client in many, many situations. Practice this skill and it will not only help your writing to be more persuasive, but it will help you have a very clear idea of where your piece of writing needs to go and help clarify your thoughts before you begin. Clear thinking and clear and precise preparation are the keys to successful persuasive writing. So engage in this exercise every time you need to do a persuasive writing task, and your writing will be much more successful. Thanks for watching. In the next unit, we move on to looking at the specific task of drafting contracts.